a promise, a deadline, a city I couldn't afford. But at 25, with nothing left to prove, I found a house, a letter, and a voice from the past that said, "You made it." I still remember the smell of his old recliner, that leathery, worn-down scent mixed with the hint of peppermint he kept in his shirt pocket. My grandfather was never the loud type. He had that quiet presence that filled a room without ever raising his voice. That night, he sat across from me, both hands wrapped around his chipped mug of black coffee, staring out the window like he was waiting for something that would never come. I was 22, dead broke, and living in a shared apartment above a liquor store in Northeast D.C. My job paid just enough to keep the lights on and the Wi-Fi working. I had big ideas, but no real plan. He knew it. That was what made it worse. He turned to me slowly and said something that dug in deep. "You were getting too comfortable renting, son. You need a place to call your own before life decides for you." His voice was calm, but I could hear the concern under it, the kind that only shows up when someone has already played out your future and does not like what they see. I laughed it off at first, tried to change the subject, but he would not let it go. He said he had grown up watching men who waited too long to plant roots, and by the time they tried, the world had already moved on without them. He was not talking about real estate. He was talking about pride, about stability, about standing on your own, even if your knees are shaking. That silence between us got heavy. I looked at him, his hands, weathered and scarred from years working the docks, still strong despite his age, and I just said it. "I promise. By the time I turn 25, I will buy a place in this city. Somewhere that is mine." He did not nod, did not smile, just kept staring out the window. But I caught that slight shift in his jaw, like he was grinding down worry into faith. That was enough. I walked home that night with something clenched tight inside my chest. It was not hope. It was weight. I had no savings, no backup, and barely any idea what I was doing with my life. But I made a promise, and I do not break promises. Not to him. 3 years sounded like a lifetime until it was not. And what I did not know that night was this: life would test that promise in ways I never saw coming. The day after I made that promise, I woke up hungover on ambition. That kind of fire in your gut energy where everything feels possible until life reminds you that motivation does not pay rent. I started looking at listings right away, like some kid window shopping for a Ferrari with $20 in his wallet. DC real estate? Laughable. You needed money, credit, and luck. I had none of those. What I did have was a graveyard shift at a convenience store, a second gig doing food delivery on a busted bicycle, and a third hustle fixing up laptops for students who could barely pay in full. Most nights, I came home soaked in sweat, half hungry, and too wired to sleep. But I kept going. Every dollar I could spare went into a separate account I named Home. I told no one, not even my friends. Especially not them. They thought I was crazy for turning down nights out, skipping trips, eating rice and eggs 5 days a week. But I remembered what Grandpa said. You wait too long, and life moves on without you. By the time I hit 23, I had saved just over $4,000. Barely a dent in DC, but to me, it was everything. Then came the first hit. My roommate, Terrence, lost his job. He could not cover rent. Said it would just be for a month or two. I let it slide. What else was I supposed to do? Kick him out in the middle of January? That month or two turned into 5. And during those 5 months, I drained every cent from the home account just to keep us both afloat. I felt bitter, but also ashamed, like I was failing and pretending not to be. When I finally asked Terrence to move out, he called me heartless. That stung more than I expected. We were supposed to be boys. But I learned something right then. Some people will lean on you so hard, they do not care if you collapse. I started over from zero at 23 and a half. I thought about breaking the promise. I really did. Maybe I could give myself a break. Maybe Grandpa was wrong. Maybe a roof is a roof. But every time that thought came up, I saw his face in the window reflection, weathered, patient, proud. And I remembered, I was not just buying a place. I was becoming the kind of man he believed I could be. Still, I had no idea how far off course things were about to get. At 24, I landed what I thought was my break. It was with this mid-sized startup in Arlington, slick office, open floor plan, ping-pong tables, and free cold brew like every other place trying to distract you from the fact that your life was slowly slipping into their hands. They called me a client success strategist. That was a fancy way of saying I dealt with angry customers while pretending everything was fine. The pay was better than anything I had earned before. Health insurance, a bus pass, even a 401k, I did not understand. I felt like I had made it. Like I was finally on a track that led somewhere solid. My savings started climbing again. The home account was no longer empty. I even started bookmarking cheap studio listings in Southeast DC. Then came the overtime, the late-night emails, the weekend calls. Just until the next product launch, they said. But that deadline kept moving like a ghost I could never catch. Sleep became optional. I was constantly tired, snapping at people, my eyes twitching from too much caffeine. Worse, my boss, Mark, was the kind of guy who smiled while bleeding you dry. Always talking about grit and hustle, like suffering was some kind of badge of honor. One Friday, after I pulled a 60-hour week and still got called out for not being visible enough, I snapped. I told him if visibility mattered more than results, maybe I should just stand in the hallway and scream. He laughed. I did not. The next Monday, I got a warning email from HR. Apparently, someone said I was hostile. That same week, I found out they had hired 2 interns to shadow my role. I was being replaced. By the end of the month, I was gone. No severance. Just a generic thank you email and a sad little box of my desk stuff. I went home and stared at my reflection for a long time. I felt like a failure. Not just because I had lost a job, but because, deep down, I had believed it would save me. Like maybe if I worked hard enough, I could finally stop running on fear. The worst part? My savings took a hit again. Rent ate away what little I had left, and once more, I was staring at an empty home account. 24 and back to square one. I could have given up. Should have, maybe. But I did not. Because every time I thought about quitting, I heard my grandfather's voice in my head, clear as anything. You wait too long, and life moves on without you. And I was not about to let that happen, not again. With no job, no income, and only 9 months left before I turned 25, desperation started creeping in like mold under the floorboards. I took a night security gig at a storage facility on the edge of Maryland. It paid barely above minimum wage, but they let me bring my laptop. That was the loophole I needed. See, I had been dabbling in web design since high school, just little side projects here and there. Nothing serious. But one night, sitting alone in that cold office with nothing but the hum of a vending machine to keep me company, I opened up a freelancing site and posted a listing. I charged cheap, too cheap, really, but within a week, I landed a client. A dentist's office wanted a new website. I built it in 3 nights, juggling that with walking the facility halls every hour and fending off raccoons near the dumpster. They loved the site and paid me early. That small win? It lit something inside me. I doubled down. Took every gig I could find. Restaurant menus, wedding planners, even a guy who needed a 1-page site for his snake breeding business. No judgment. Money was money. Soon, I was pulling in more from design than I was from the actual security job. I thought I had cracked the code. That maybe, just maybe, this could be it. Then came the email. Apparently, I had violated some obscure clause in the security company's contract. No outside work while on duty, they said. Fired me on the spot. That was the moment I learned. Progress is never linear. Life does not hand you wins without testing if you are ready to bleed for them. I was furious. Embarrassed. Scared. But instead of crawling back to some desk job, I made a choice. I took the last $200 I had and bought a domain. Set up a proper site for my freelancing. Created a logo. Printed business cards. Even though I barely left my apartment, I needed to feel like I was building something real. And that feeling? It started to stick. The work trickled in. Not fast, not steady, but enough. I was surviving. More than that, I was building something I could own. But even then, I knew the math. DC real estate was still a pipe dream. I could not afford it. Not in the time frame I promised. Still, I kept going. Because sometimes, the promise is not about reaching the exact goal. It is about proving you will not stop trying, even when the map catches fire and the road disappears beneath your feet. And just when I thought I had adjusted to the struggle, the phone rang. It was a number I had not seen in over a year. When I saw the number flash across my screen, my stomach tightened. It was from a small town upstate, area code I recognized instantly. That number used to belong to my grandfather. But he had passed 6 months earlier. I froze. For a second, I thought it might be some sort of mistake, or worse, a cruel prank. But I picked up. The voice on the other end was soft, familiar, and not at all who I expected. It was Evelyn, his neighbor, the same woman who used to bring him apple pies and check on him after snowstorms. She said she was going through his things and came across something he had asked her to hold on to in case his boy ever seemed lost. A letter. She said she could read it over the phone or mail it. I told her to read it. Right then, I do not remember every word, but parts of it stuck like nails in my chest. He wrote, "If you are hearing this, it means I probably did not get to see the end of your journey. But I want you to know, the promise you made to me, it was never about a building. It was about becoming the kind of man who honors his word, even when no one is watching. That kind of man will find home wherever he goes." I had not cried in a long time. Not when I got fired. Not when I lost jobs or clients or missed meals. But that letter cracked something open. Because he knew. Somehow, he knew this path would not be straight. That I would fall. That I would question everything. And he believed in me anyway. Evelyn paused for a long time after she finished reading. Then she said something simple. "He loved you fiercely. He used to brag that you were going to change everything." That call did something to me. It stripped away the pressure of the deadline, the obsession with DC, the fantasy of proving something to the world. All that was left was the promise. Not the location. Not the price tag. Just the soul of it. The next day, I changed my search filter. Instead of Washington, D.C., I started looking along the coast. And one listing stopped me cold. Oceanfront. New York. Small house. Needed work. But something about it felt right. Like maybe that letter came exactly when it was supposed to. And maybe, just maybe, the promise was not broken. It was evolving. I stared at that listing for almost an hour. Just a modest two-bedroom tucked along a quiet stretch of coast near Long Beach, New York. The siding was faded. The porch sagged slightly. The windows looked like they had not seen new glass since the 90s. But the ocean? The ocean was right there. So close you could probably hear the waves in your sleep. The price was just under what I had scraped together over the last year from web design, odd jobs, and living like a ghost. No furniture, no big purchases, no trips, just saving. Grinding. Trying to stretch every dollar like it owed me something. I knew the promise had been DC. That had been the goal. But when I saw that house, a strange kind of calm rolled over me. It was not about status or showing off. It was about air, space, freedom, and that water. That water felt like peace. I booked a train that afternoon. Rode north with nothing but a backpack and a clipboard full of financial papers. When I arrived, the air smelled like salt and old wood. The street was quiet. Birds overhead. A breeze that felt like it had something to say if I would just stand still long enough to hear it. The real estate agent was late, so I sat on the front steps and waited. And while I waited, I pictured my grandfather sitting beside me, quiet like always, just nodding. The tour did not take long. The place was small, but it had bones. Good ones. Floors that creaked honestly. A kitchen that needed help, but had potential. And when I walked into the back room and opened the sliding glass door, that view hit me like a prayer answered late. Ocean. Endless and alive. It was not DC. Not even close. But in that moment, I stopped caring. Because suddenly, I could breathe. The agent asked if I wanted time to think. I told him no. I was done thinking. I signed the papers the next day. At 25 years and 3 months old, I became a homeowner. Not in the city I had promised, but in the place my soul had quietly been dragging me toward all along. I thought it was the end of the journey. Turns out, it was just the beginning. Because someone showed up at my door that night. Someone I had not seen in years. It was just past 9 at night when I heard the knock. Not a hard one. Not aggressive. Just a couple soft taps, like whoever was out there was not sure if they should be. I had only been in the house for 5 days. Still no couch. Still eating off a folding chair and an overturned milk crate. But I had the keys, the deed, and my name on the mailbox. I opened the door slowly, half expecting a neighbor or maybe someone selling lawn service. But it was my father. I had not seen him in nearly 4 years. He looked older, more than I expected. Like the weight he carried finally started to show on his face. His hair had gone completely gray. He still wore that same beaten-down Carhartt jacket, the one I remembered from when I was a kid, back when we still had Sunday barbecues and spoke without biting our tongues. He cleared his throat but did not say anything at first. Then he muttered, he would have liked it here. I did not respond. Just let the silence sit between us, thick and uncomfortable. The last time we had talked, it ended in a screaming match about wasting time and how I needed to stop chasing nonsense. That nonsense was the promise I had made. The very reason I was now standing inside my own home. He looked down, his boots shifting awkwardly on the wooden step. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Said it was Grandpa's. Said he found it while clearing the attic. I took it without saying a word. Inside were a few old photos, me as a kid, sitting on Grandpa's lap at a fishing pier. A tiny compass. And one of those old wooden keychains carved with the word home. It broke something in me. Not in a bad way. More like something stiff and angry inside me just let go. I looked up and asked him why he came. He shrugged. Said he heard from Evelyn. Said she told him I had followed through. Said he figured maybe he should see it for himself. I let him in. Just for a minute. We stood there, staring out the back window at the ocean. For a second, I thought I could smell that old mix of leather and peppermint. It was faint, but it wrapped around me like a memory too strong to forget. No small talk. No apologies. But in that silence, I felt something settle. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the start of something close to it. And when he finally left, he turned around before stepping off the porch. You did it, he said. He would have been proud. I stood there long after he was gone, holding the keychain in my hand, the waves crashing soft in the distance. And I realized I was not waiting for someone to be proud of me anymore. Because I already was. A storm rolled in the next morning. Not one of those violent, panic tempests, just a slow, steady kind. The kind where the sky turns this soft gray and everything gets quiet. Even the seagulls seemed to take the day off. I sat on the floor by the sliding door, legs crossed, mug of black coffee warming my palms. The ocean looked heavier under that sky, like it was carrying secrets too big to say out loud. The rain hit the roof in a rhythm I had not heard since childhood. And for the first time in years, I let myself be still. No emails. No deadlines. No notifications buzzing like hornets in my pocket. Just me, this empty house, and the sound of everything I had been chasing finally catching up to me. That is when I found the list. It was scribbled in a crumpled notebook I had stuffed in my backpack months earlier, back when I was still sleeping 5 hours a night and eating dollar ramen on repeat. The top of the page just said, to do before 25. And there it was, fourth bullet down. Buy apartment in D.C., make Grandpa proud. I stared at that line for a long time. At first, I felt guilty. Like I had broken some sacred code. Like I had missed the mark. But the more I looked at it, the more I started to understand what that list had really been. Not a checklist. A map. And like any map, sometimes the destination changes. Sometimes the road bends. Sometimes you realize the place you were aiming for is not where you were meant to land. Because what he wanted, what he really wanted, was not for me to live in some overpriced concrete box downtown. He wanted me to grow into a man who could stand on his own. Who could take a hit and keep moving. Who could build something from nothing, with hands calloused from work and a heart still soft enough to care. And that I had done. I did not need a DC zip code to prove it. The rain kept falling. And for once, I did not feel the need to rush. Not toward anything. Not away from anything. Because in that quiet house, with the scent of salt air and black coffee mixing in the air, I finally felt it. Home. A week later, I was ripping up old carpet in the guest bedroom. I had no real plan, just figured I would start somewhere. The place needed love, and I finally had time to give it. The edges peeled easily, but in the middle of the room, the boards fought back like they were protecting something. Underneath the last stubborn corner, I found it. A loose floorboard. Warped and sun-faded. I pried it up, expecting dust or old nails. Instead, there was a folded-up envelope tucked in the gap. No name. No address. Just sealed, yellowed with age. At first, I thought maybe someone had stashed cash there. But when I opened it, I found something stranger. It was a letter written by the previous owner's son, dated back almost 2 decades. He had written about how his father bought the place with barely enough credit to his name, how he spent every weekend fixing it up with his bare hands, and how proud he was the day he handed the keys to his boy before passing on. The letter ended with one line I will never forget. This house is more than wood and nails. It is proof that promises, when kept, can become shelter. I just sat there, crouched on a splintered floor, holding that paper like it was made of gold. It felt like something or someone was speaking directly to me. I had thought the journey ended when I signed the deed. I had thought the promise was fulfilled the second I held those keys. But this house, this place, it was more than that now. It had weight. Not the heavy kind that breaks your back. The kind that grounds you. Reminds you that everything you fought through is not wasted. Every late night, every failure, every sacrifice, they were the bricks in something real. Not just walls. Meaning. This house had been waiting for someone like me. and in a strange, silent way. I think Grandpa knew it. Maybe that is why Evelyn found that letter when she did. Maybe that is why my father showed up after years of silence. Maybe this house was not a detour from the promise. Maybe it was the promise, just dressed in different colors. The rain had stopped by then. The air was still. And as I stared at the letter in my hands, I realized something that shook me more than any twist in this whole story. The promise was never about DC. It was about becoming the kind of man who could keep his word, no matter where it led him. I stood out front the next morning just as the sun broke over the water. No phone, no distractions. Just barefoot on the dew-covered porch, coffee steaming in my hands, and that salty breeze moving through my hair like a quiet nod from the universe. The house was mine. It still needed work, paint peeling off the trim, one gutter hanging by a nail, and the kitchen faucet that groaned every time I turned it. But it was real. It was standing. And so was I. 3 years ago, I was a kid chasing a city skyline because I thought success came with square footage and a recognizable zip code. Back then, I believed home was a goal you reached. Something you bought. Something that made other people take you seriously. But standing there now, watching the waves roll in and the sky shift from deep blue to orange, I knew better. Home is not something you find. It is someone you become. I made a promise at 22. I thought I was promising a property. I thought it had to be DC, with polished floors and a rooftop view. But what I really promised was that I would not settle for being lost. That I would grow into the kind of man my grandfather believed I could be. Someone who did not run from struggle. Someone who built instead of borrowed. Someone who showed up, even when no one else was watching. And I kept that promise. Not with paperwork or down payments, but by becoming a man who could stand in the silence of an empty house, breathe deep, and feel peace. Grandpa never saw this place. Never walked through it. Never sat on the porch. But he is here. In every nail I hammer. In the way I pause before speaking. In the stubborn grit that pushed me forward when it would have been easier to quit. I wish he could see it. I wish he could feel what I feel now. But then again, maybe he always could. Maybe he knew the promise would bend. Maybe he trusted me to find my own version of it. And maybe that was the point all along. I took that old wooden keychain from his box, the one that said home, and hung it on the nail by the door. It swayed gently in the breeze. Not flashy, not loud. Just there. Like the truth. The kind that takes years to understand. The kind that stays with you, long after the world stops clapping. Because in the end, it was never about the house. It was about the promise. And the man I had to become to keep it.